Uh, Commissioner Verber, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioners George Salgin.
Here.
Deborah Van Essen.
Here.
David Collins.
Here.
Jeff Bayou.
Here.
Stephen Berber.
Here.
Lori Bennell.
Okay, this is our time for public discussion. This time is provided to the public to address the Planning Commission on items that are not on the agenda. State law prohibits the commission from taking action on any of these items. Each person will be limited to no more than 5 minutes of discussion time, and the total time allotted for discussion shall not exceed 30 minutes. No time for public discussion. Okay, so now we are reorganizing. We have, I'd like to set a motion for moving Commissioner Van Essen into the chairman role and Commissioner Collins into the vice chair.
I'd second that.
Discussion?
You can do both at the same time.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
I second that.
Okay, second is there.
Right on. We're going to do a roll call vote.
Okay.
So David Collins. George
Yes.
Salgin. Jeff Bayou.
Yes.
Deborah Van Essen. Stephen Berber.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm in charge now.
Stay where you are. Give her the gavel. She may wish to use it.
We don't have I don't have my cheat sheet. But that's all right. I think I can remember.
You're good. We still got to do vice chair too.
No, we did.
Oh,
We did both.
Oh, we did both.
We did both. We're done.
And let me
Yeah.
thank Chairman Bayou for his service. Limited as it was, we didn't have that many meetings, but thank you very much.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Did,
Well done.
did a good job. Yes. Yes. So going forward, I'd like yeah. But I think we're okay tonight because, well, first we'll do the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was November 17th. A motion?
I would make a motion to approve those minutes. Second.
Is this roll call also, or?
Roll call tonight. That'll probably make it easier. So George Salgin. Deborah Van Essen.
Yes?
David Collins. Jeff Bayou.
Yes.
Stephen Berber.
Yes.
Right on.
Okay. Tonight, we do have public hearing. However, since there is no public here, I'm not going to go through the specifics of what we have to do for public hearing, opening it up and et cetera, et cetera. I guess we can do that, right? Do I have to? Okay. Right. So we are going to open the public hearing. The first thing on the agenda is the Iona, is that correct?
Yep.
Iona Development Agreement. And Planning Director, if you could explain that to us, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. As you remember, October of last year, in front of the Planning Commission was a electric vehicle charging station that was approved. It was adjacent to the La Quinta Hotel and the Starbucks out there. It's kind of a dirt site that's kind of tucked back in the corner, if you recall. During that approval process, there was conditions of approval that were part of the staff report. And one of those conditions was to enter into a development agreement with the city prior to receiving their building permit. So this is just in fulfillment of their conditions of approval for the project. This is in front of you tonight for consideration. We just pretty much took all the conditions of approval from the staff report and put them into the development agreement that's in front of you tonight. We did send this to the applicant. They reviewed it, they signed it, are in agreement with it. So this is a recommendation tonight that you guys will be making to the city council. The city council has the final vote on this, but with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, and be happy to answer any questions.
So we do a development agreement with anybody who develops in the city, correct?
We don't with Not with every project. We do with most of our residential developments, we do because of the complexities of those. And then some of these other uses, which we are considering more of like passive uses in town, we are looking at doing development agreements with projects like this. So you will see some of these coming through from occasion now, moving forward with certain projects.
Okay, so for everyone, we would have to approve the development agreement.
Yeah, so like I
So it's
said,
not
it is a
automatic.
condition of approval that they're just fulfilling. So that's why it's coming back in front of you this evening to fulfill that condition so they can get started on the project.
But normally going forward, this would just be part of the.
It could be
process.
part of the original, I mean, it could be a part of the original application packet. We could run it that way as well. This one here, we actually, because of the kind of the timing on it, and they wanted to kind of get approvals going. We went through that process first and just made it a condition, but yeah, in the future, you could see it as just part of the application packet. So it could have been at the October meeting is what you're asking, and
Right.
we could have had it that way too.
And I'm thinking going forward, it just seems to me that it would make good business sense for the city to have a development agreement when somebody's doing a development.
Right, right. I mean, you're not gonna see them for every single project, but you will start seeing a little bit more of these coming through.
Okay.
Can you differentiate the kind of projects that we expect to see this from the kind of?
Tommy, you wanna kind of chime in on that at all, or?
It's hard for me to say. Yeah, I think I think it's more of a project by project determination.
Okay.
Just from a staff, I think it's really just kind of as we're working with the applicant and seeing the the improvements that we're looking to get out of the specific project. I think just on a case by case basis, I think there's a threshold that I think staff will reach where it's like okay, where we go from you know what, this is not just a, low level project or, I wouldn't put it in that term, but I guess it exceeds a certain threshold where staff starts to desire to memorialize some of these obligations within a more formal agreement, like a development agreement. And so
Is it
it
more,
just, it varies by the project, I would say.
is it more the complexity of the project, what the use will be? W- Is there?
I think it does, I mean, it gets into a little bit of the complexities of it, and it does certainly get into the different uses
Okay.
that you're gonna see come before
Great.
you. So you're gonna see them with certain projects and other projects, you might just see your typical conditions of approval without a development agreement.
Does the development agreement, is it just trying to attain alignment within all parties so that we're all speaking the same language, we're comparing apples to apples? It's alignment is what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and it is, and obviously it's ensuring all the conditions of approval are being met, which is the case with every project, but yeah, it is kind of that alignment, that you're talking about.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Would anybody like any more discussion or questions or anyone like to make a motion?
Go back to that.
It's on our sheet here.
Yeah.
I just want to read through
I'm
this.
go-
Okay.
The planning commission recommends that the city approve the amendments to, no, that's the wrong one, shoot. Come on. Thought it was all the way at the top. Where'd it go? Hang on. Recommends city council approve the development agreement with Iona LLC for the electric vehicle charging station project located at 1504 West Colony Road.
Second. Awesome. Let's do roll call. David Collins. George Salgin. Jeff Vayu.
Yes.
Deborah Van Essen.
Yes.
Stephen Berber.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. The next item on our agenda is one of our favorite ones, a zoning text amendment for accessory dwelling units.
And then I did want to say, I did get one written public comment for this, which I printed out for you guys. And for the sake of reading this, I will include this in the minutes for this meeting, so.
All right. Mr. Director.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. I won't go through the staff report, but I did put together a PowerPoint that I'd like to kind of cruise through for you guys. If you have any questions, since there's not a lot of people here, if you want this, kind of feel free to stop me and maybe ask during the presentation, or you can save them to the end, whatever you like. So this is obviously an amendment to the Section 1686 of the Ripon Municipal Code. It's regarding accessory dwelling units and what they call junior accessory dwelling units. That basically tonight is a public hearing, and so the agenda tonight would be, first of all, staff will present the item, which we'll go through in this slideshow here. Then we'll go on to commissioners' questions. We will then receive any public comment, which doesn't look like anybody's here at this point, but if there is anybody that desires to speak on that, they can at that point. We'll then turn it back over to the commission for deliberation, any further questions, and then we would hope to get an action on the recommendation for the amendment in front of you tonight. So, little background here. Basically, the Ripon Municipal Code for accessory dwelling units was last updated in 2021. Since that time, we adopted the ADU ordinance 2021. There was some changes prior to that, 16, 17, and 19. But since that time in 2022, 2024, and now in 2025, the state legislature has been very busy putting some additional regulations in place. So we are just trying to bring our existing ordinance into compliance with state law. So in 2025, there's a couple assembly bills. 462 is primarily a procedural and emergency response bill, not a development standards bill. It basically streamlines ADU approvals. It strengthens the 60-day ministerial requirement that we have to make sure we approve applications within 60 days of receiving them, and allows ADUs to function as interim housing after disasters, something that we haven't necessarily had to deal with, thank goodness, but in other areas of the state, there have been some of that. Also is Assembly Bill 1154, which was passed in 2025. It's a targeted update for JADUs. The bill primarily reduces regulatory barriers and clarifies standards to make small in-home units easier to build. Biggest takeaway from this bill is the elimination of the owner occupancy requirement under certain circumstances. So in the past with junior accessory dwelling units, we had a requirement for owners to live on the property, either in the junior accessory dwelling unit or the primary dwelling unit. That restriction has now been removed by state law, so we cannot require that. So in essence, somebody could buy a house, put a junior accessory dwelling unit in it, and rent both units out and not live on the property. And then Senate Bill 543 was passed in 2025, which is primarily a clarification and enforcement bill. It's not a major expansion of development standards. It just really eliminates ambiguity in ADU law, which there was quite a bit of it. Standardizes permitting procedures statewide. It strengthens state oversight of local ordinances and extends ADU protections to JADUs. So in practice, SB 543 ensures that cities apply ADU laws correctly and consistently across the state, with limited room for local interpretation. So they're kind of removing kind of that wiggle room that states had in these ordinances. And so the city basically, right, because of these, the city needs to update our ADU regulations in our Ripon Municipal Code. So I'll go through several sections of these. These are all kind of key takeaways from, I think, the proposed ADU ordinance. We'll do a comparison of a little bit later. We'll be doing some comparisons of state law versus current city ordinances, so we can kind of compare where the state law is headed and where we're off base maybe a little bit, and updating our ordinance. So one of the key takeaways is the introduction of a state exempt ADU. That's one of the big clarifications on this. State law created two distinct categories now of accessory dwelling units. Under a certain section of the California Government Code, 66323, you'll hear people refer to state exempt units as those 66323 units, or so-called state exempt. ADUs are those that meet specific criteria, such as size and configuration, and they must be approved ministerially, which all ADUs are required to be approved ministerially. It can't be something that comes in front of the Planning Commission for discretionary review. With very limited local control on these state exempt units. These units are subject to strict state standards, including reduced setbacks and capped heights. All other ADUs fall into what we refer to as non-exempt ADUs, so there's that other category. While these must still be approved ministerially, cities retain the ability to apply what they call objective standards, such as height, maybe some different setbacks and design requirements, like making sure that the ADU matches the primary unit as far as material, like roof material, siding, stucco, that type of stuff. You can make sure the colors match the main unit as well. Cannot do that with state exempt units, but you can do this with the non-exempt units. Just so long as those standards do not conflict with state law or preclude construction of an ADU. So you can't put a standard in place that would preclude somebody from building an ADU on their property. Sure.
Review when it came to even the 66323s as far as the materials, the color, window placement.
No, not anymore. You can build an ADU now, state exempt ADU. Say you can have a certain style house on your property and build a state exempt ADU. It doesn't match it whatsoever,
Wow,
material
that was my
wise.
reading of the material. I thought it said we still had at least control over that aspect of
No.
it. Even trees and whatnot to shield a neighbor's yard from.
No, fully lost that kind of ability with these new state laws coming through.
Yeah, my reading, it was the same read that you had, and then I read AB 1154, and it narrows the criteria. So a question on AB 1154, in the language that I read, there nowhere does it say, it just says a bathroom. So could somebody put a porta potty out and that will allow the owner of the property to not reside? Do you see the Pandora's
Yeah,
boxes
that's
being
for
open
like
there?
the JADUs.
Yeah, the
You're talking-
JADs, yeah.
No, we wouldn't allow them to put a porta potty out in the yard to do that. They would have to be hooked up to city utilities and
It would,
such.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I mean, I'd have to defer to the city attorney on that, but I actually believe that would be the same interpretation there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused between these state exempt and non-state. Aren't all of them state exempt?
No, they're not.
So
So
everything?
we'll get in a little bit later on some of the size requirements, but state exempt are units up to 800 square feet. So a person has to be able to build at least an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit on their property.
For it to be a state exempt.
Yeah, and so that would classify it as a state exempt if it's 800 or less. They are required to have 4-foot side yard setbacks if it's not a conversion. So if you're converting an existing building, say in the old part of town where there's some garages that are on property lines, you have to allow them to convert that even though the setback might be 0.
Right.
So they can convert those into an ADU. But a new ADU has to be at least 4 feet off the side and the rear property line.
And that's per state.
Yeah, that's per state. Now, if it's above 800 square foot, then you get into the non-exempt ADU where we can start requiring, screening, matching the main house as far as window coverings and material, roof material, roof pitch, things like that, if it's a non-exempt. So the state's really got into saying you're allowed to have an ADU to the extent that even like on a front setback on a house, like a front yard setback, and even a side yard, like on a corner lot, if you can't fit at least an 800 square foot ADU on your property, and still comply with like the front setback, you would have to reduce those front setbacks. So your house maybe sits back at 20 feet, but you might have to let the ADU be 15 feet, have a 15-foot front setback, because you cannot preclude them having at least an 800 square foot ADU. Now, I don't think we'll run into that we'll run into that scenario too much here, because just because they might want to put it in a certain spot doesn't mean they automatically can have it there. If they can have an 800 square foot ADU somewhere else on their property, we can make sure that they still comply with the setbacks. But if there's no other place to put this thing, and that's the only spot it could go, we would have to work with them on setbacks and things like that for a state exempt.
Can you point me to which bill said what you were telling me about?
This guy can.
Because what I had read was that you had some discretion in terms of like materials, roof pitch, lighting, shading, color palettes. But that it had to formulated as a checklist, not as a design opinion. So can somebody tell me where it
I can
contradicted?
get you the most recent copies, because I think what can be confusing with this is just reading the legislation, but once you read the actual the government code that it's recodifying,
Mhm.
the ecosystem makes a little bit more sense. And so
Yeah.
I'm happy to give you a
Yeah,
copy of that
please
later.
do. I would appreciate that because that's contrary to
Of course.
what I had read earlier. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. That's fine.
Oh, you know what?
Yep, go ahead.
Since you brought it up, you talked about we'd have to make an exception, the front yard, et cetera. What about our rules as to lot coverage?
So for state exempt, it doesn't even come into play. You cannot consider it. For non-exempt, now, when you get into the non-exempt categories, we can consider lot coverage. So if somebody were to want to build 1,000 square foot ADU and it's going to exceed the lot coverage, we could tell them no on that. They're exceeding the floor area ratio or the lot coverage, and they would have to reduce it. But you can't force them to reduce it less than 800 square feet, because then now you're precluding a state exempt ADU.
Wow.
So kind of in short here, the distinction is important because, state exempt ADUs are governed almost entirely by state law, where we have really no say over these things, whereas the non-exempt ADUs allow for a measured, kind of a measured level of local control through what they call objective standards. So if we get too, kind of too out of line with our kind of our standards, even on our non-exempt, the state could come in and say our municipal code isn't in compliance with state law, and which kind of renders it null and void, and then you fall back to state law. So we're trying to dance that fine line there with the design criteria and stuff for the non-exempt as well. But yeah, great questions on those. So also some of these other bills did is they did it expanded ADU allowances. So our existing ordinance basically says you get one ADU and one junior accessory dwelling unit per lot. So single family can have a junior accessory dwelling unit and another accessory dwelling unit. So essentially 3 units per lot.
You say per lot, does that mean it could be a 5,000 square foot lot? Could be a half acre lot? What's
Yes. You can't take into consideration
Yes.
anything for lot size or anything.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So kind of here for single family dwelling units, for the ADU allowances, state law creates a separate entitlement for junior accessory dwelling units, a conversion accessory dwelling unit within an existing space, and a new detached ADU up to 800 square feet. So when combined, you can have a junior ADU in the primary house or as part of the primary house. You can convert a detached structure like a garage, game room, pool house into an ADU. And you can also build a detached ADU up to 800 square feet on the lot. So when combined, this can result in multiple accessory dwelling units on a single lot. And cities are not permitted to require an applicant to choose between them. So if somebody is creative enough and can fit them all on, you could end up with primary dwelling unit with 3 other units. So you can have 4 units on a lot. And you can have these where we used to have the owner occupy at least one of the units on a lot. So there was a little more, hopefully, upkeep of the lot and more control over some of this stuff as far as maintenance and make sure the property upkeep was done. That's been removed. So now someone can buy a house and add all these units on it and have 4 rentals. And when we get later into the slideshow, you'll see that a lot of the parking requirements are removed out of the state law. So now you've got 4 units on a lot, and where does everybody park? Well, they're all gonna start spilling out on the street to some extent if they can meet a lot of these exemptions, which most of them can. So yeah, that's kind of where we're being led with the state law, and then you get into multifamily, which we haven't seen really many of these yet come through. Obviously, a multifamily could be, what's considered multifamily is a duplex, and above. So a duplex, triplex, or a small apartment complex, they could add ADUs. So, a multifamily property, containing 2 or more existing dwellings on a single lot. Basically, state law requires that these properties must be allowed to add both conversion ADUs within existing structures. So if there's existing structures, they can convert those to ADUs up to 25% of the existing units. So, and newly constructed detached ADUs up to a maximum of 8 units, or the number of existing units, whichever is less. So on a multifamily property, if there's 4 units there, they can add up to 4 detached ADUs, and they can also do some conversion ADUs. So part of the revisions in front of you tonight, the city's existing ordinance under permits ADUs, basically the way it's written now, since we adopted it in 2021. There's a lot that's changed since then. Size requirements for these, you guys like kind of a state law versus the city of Ripon here. So the state law in 2026 requires at least 1 ADU up to 800 square foot must be allowed. So not subject to lot coverage or minimum lot sizes, as Commissioner Vayu had asked. It's kind of spelled out in that one there. And then attached ADUs up to 50. Attached ADUs you can do up to, let's see where that one was, up to 50% of the primary dwelling, or at least 800 square feet. So that's for the attached ADUs. So, if you have a 3,000 square foot house, that would exceed kind of our maximum requirement. So you can limit them to 50% of the house. So, well, let's just take an 1,800 square foot example. So somebody had an 1,800 square foot house, they would be limited to like a 900 square foot ADU, 50% of the unit house. But at no point can you preclude up to 800 square feet. So if they had a 1,200 square foot house, half of that's only 600 square feet, you'd still have to let them do an attached 800 square foot ADU. So in essence, the ADU would be, a little over half the size of the main house. And then for detached, you must allow at least 800 square feet, and cities may set maximums above those minimums. So you'll see later in our ordinance, it was carried over from our 2021 ordinance that we capped that maximum at 1,000 square feet. A lot of other jurisdictions we're seeing is kind of a 1,200 square foot is what they're maxing out at. And there are some others that are 1,000 too. So we've capped it out at 1,000. So our current standards, basically, the current allows ADUs up to 1,000 square feet max, like I did just mention. So we're not changing that at all, and state law doesn't mandate that we do that. However, the attached ADUs, basically the way the code's written right now, it's non-compliant. They're limited to 50% of the primary dwelling. However, it doesn't clearly ensure that a minimum of 800 square feet can be built. So that's kind of where we're off base on that a little bit. We currently say 50%, but we have to at least get that 800 square foot language in there. And then for the detached ADUs, it is compliant. However, again, subject to the same 1,000 square foot max. We do not clearly differentiate between state exempt ADUs, the less than 800 square feet, and the non-exempt, which is greater than 800 square feet. So it's a little bit of clarity language there. Before, when we did this other ordinance, there wasn't such thing as a state exempt and a non-exempt ADU.
Can I ask you a quick question on
Sure.
1686 050 non-exempt ADU standards? I just want to understand this a little bit better. I think I get it, but on D number
030, you said?
Yeah, it's it has to do with an ADU the ADU is approved if it's located within one block of a car share vehicle. Are you talking about Uber and Lyft?
No, car shares, if you're, I don't know if we, did we, I think we didn't put the definition of a car share in there because it's defined in state law, but a car share is more of like, oh, I'm trying to think of it, have you heard like a
Like a
Turo?
park and ride?
No, or like,
Or-
like a Turo, have you heard of those?
Oh, Turo, yeah, I've used
Yeah, where
Turo
like you
before.
can rent
Mhm.
somebody's car. Like it's not an Uber or Lyft. It's basically like a car rental that is within the vicinity of your ADU. So a car share would be like something like that where they can rent those. Is that correct on that, Tommy? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And back on the 80 sides there, just and where we're a little bit out of line yet on our ordinance, doesn't explicitly provide for a guaranteed ministerial pathway for an 800 square foot ADU or contain clear exemptions for lot coverage or similar constraints. So we'd have to update our ordinance to include those since the introduction of the state exempt ADU. Next is the height limits. Basically, state law allows for a 16-foot height. It must be allowed. It applies to all jurisdictions. It's a baseline standard across the state. An ADU is considered basically it can go up to 18 feet if it's within a half mile of a transit or on multifamily lots. So basically, it's considered within half mile of transit if it is within a half mile walking distance of a major transit stop, high quality transit corridor, or a bus stop or fixed route service. So just for information, a major transit stop would be an existing rail station, bus rapid transit, neither of which we have in Ripon, a bus rapid transit station, which is a high quality permanent transit stop designed to emulate the speed or comfort of like a light rail, a ferry terminal, again, nothing that we're concerned about in Ripon, a major bus intersection, or a planned transit, planned major transit stops that are included in the regional transportation plan and programmed to be completed before or within 1 year of the housing. So there's been discussion for quite some time of the ACE train coming through Ripon here, and we do have some property that the city has set aside for that. That's being pushed back. So even that now, that would fall under the major transit stop category, but it's being pushed out enough to where that wouldn't qualify anybody at this point because it's pushed out so far that it's not expected within the next 12 months or 1 year of the housing being developed. So we'll kind of keep up on that. I know city engineer is working with ACE on that to see kind of when they're planning that. It could be a 5 or 10 year window now at this point. I think they're focusing more on heading north to the Sacramento corridor area with their ACE stations and stops at this point. And then also the height limits can go up to 18 feet if it's in a high quality transit corridor, which is an existing corridor with fixed route bus service, providing service intervals of 15 minutes or less during peak commute hours. We don't have those here in Ripon. What we do have would be like a transit stop. We do have a couple hard stops for our buses that run through here. So if an ADU or JADU is being constructed, or an ADU is being constructed within a half mile, that's when you have to worry about kind of that extra height limit allowance.
Ken, you said, in some of the reading that I did, it showed up to 25 feet was allowable by the state. Are we capping it at 18?
No, these are mostly for detached. Attached units can go up to 25.
Okay.
Again, we have no transportation currently, is that what I'm hearing?
We do have some bus services that come through, and there's some fixed stops, and those are what we would consider our transit stops here in town.
What about ACE train?
The ACE train, like I said, the ACE stop that we have purchased property down there for, since it's not here yet, we don't have to worry about that at this point. But if it does get located here at some point or within a year, we know it's coming, then they can take advantage of some of these height allowances, I guess, if they're within that certain distance.
So Ken, if we were to compare this to our standard building permit for a residential dwelling, single-family house in the city of Ripon. How would you equate the rules and regulations from the state in terms of permitting versus the ADU, JADU permitting process that the state is requiring us to? Is it much softer, kind of softer?
Well, I mean, the process is similar in the sense that you know, you can go walk into the building department, you own a lot in town, you can walk into the building department, get a building permit for a house. However, with a standard house, you're looking at regular setbacks. You're looking at
Right.
Ripon Municipal Code. So you're looking at, you know, rear yard, side yard, front yard setbacks. You're looking at height restrictions. Two-story homes here, most single-family lots allow for a two-story home, which is up to 35 feet in height. That's a pretty tall house. ADUs, even if they're attached, they're being restricted to 25 feet. So that is a little bit lower than what our code allows. But process is similar, but what we're being like, what is being kind of, I guess, in a lack of a better term, forced upon cities is these reduced setbacks to allow these units to be put in place.
And also the ministerial process seems to be much faster for the ADU process. You have your time limitation is 30 days at some point, 60 days at some point, but there's a time requirement, like you're put on the clock as a city to approve. Is that the same
Yeah,
for the state with the residential?
we're not necessarily held to that from with a single family residential. I would say that our permitting process is just as fast probably for a
Okay.
single family residential. Where you get into kind of some delays and it doesn't even really affect ADUs in the sense that you know, we can get through a plan check within this time frame pretty easily, even on a single family home. We'll send a plan check back for comments. You know, you redline it, send it back, and then we're waiting for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months back to get plans back from the architect where they've corrected those red line comments. Sometimes it goes back 2 or 3 times, back and forth, where they don't address everything. So, you know, we could redline a plan for an ADU within that 60-day time frame, and then if they sit on it for 6 months, it's not. I mean, it's not counting on our time
Got it.
because they can't just wait you out and say, okay, well, we're not addressing these comments that you guys made, and it's automatically approved. You know, so. Um, in that sense, the process, I mean, they are mandated in a sense, you know, for ADUs, but they're not really pushing us out of what we normally do, I think, for our single family homes.
Thank you.
Can send comparison to impact fees?
We'll get through that. There's no slide here for impact fees, which I'll go through on that. That's a whole nother can of worms. And then, let's see, up to 20 foot is allowed. It includes it's a 2-foot roof pitch allowance to match the primary dwelling roof pitch. You know, that it is just a taller unit, I guess. Obviously, I mean, I guess could be some arguments if you're trying to match the pitch of the primary house. It's a little bit complementary, but I think you got to remember these things could be 4 feet off of your back property line and 4 feet off your side property line. So it's impacting you as a nearby neighbor quite a bit, being that close. And then you cannot, the last point there is you cannot limit ADUs to 1 story. Our current ordinance says you can't build a 2-story ADU. That's kind of that's been taken out of our hands at this point. State law regulates height basically only, not number of stories. So if somebody can figure out how to build a 2nd story in a 16-foot type house or an 18-foot, we couldn't tell them they couldn't do a 2nd story or a 2-story ADU. So Ripon's current standards where we're at, our detached ADU is limited to 16 foot or 1 story. Again, that's not compliant really anymore. 16 foot is really the same height limit that's allowed across the board, but we don't have those extra adders in there that's required by state law. You know, we specifically state it has to be 1 story, so we have to remove that out of our current our proposed ordinance. And the attached ADUs, the 25-foot limit, Mr. Salgin there, as you talked about, we didn't really define it in our previous code, but now we're having to really define what it is. Next is setbacks. We talked a little bit about this already. So, you know, you get applies to new detached ADUs and applies regardless of zoning standards for state exempt. So if you're on a small lot, you're on a large lot, you know, you get different setback requirements for large lot versus small lot. Obviously, you're seeing some homes being built over here on Fulton Avenue, which is our medium density zoning. They're smaller setbacks than our larger single family lots. But regardless of that, the ADUs, a state exempt ADU gets 4-foot side and 4-foot rear setback. And the cities cannot impose greater setbacks that prohibit a feasible 800 square foot ADU to be built. And then also the 4-foot side and rear setback still applies to non-exempt ADUs. So once you get out of that state exempt ADU and you get up to maybe a larger ADU that's not meeting the requirements for state exempt, we do have some discretion on, like I said, design and compatibility at that point. But we still have to allow the 4-foot side and rear on that, which is being pushed by state law. And then conversions, obviously, if you're converting a building that's already there, no setbacks required whatsoever. There is kind of a little bit of leeway on this one as far as work they give us here is a conversion ADU has to be limited to the structure that's there. So there's a 400 square foot detached garage structure. It can only be a 400-foot ADU. They do allow like a 150 square foot addition to that as far as for ingress or egress if you're having to get somebody in and out of the house or to add like a front door or accessibility to it. But other than that, you can't add on to it and make it up to 800 square feet and still be considered a conversion. At that point, you're considered a new ADU and the setbacks would kick in.
A state exempt ADU.
They are considered a state exempt ADU.
They are, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, for the most part, our current standards, for the most part, the city's current ordinance is compliant. However, it does have some ambiguity. So the proposed revision just making the clear distinctions for state exempt and non-exempt. Again, we didn't, obviously, this didn't even exist when we did our last ordinance update. So having to add those in to have some clarity there. This gets into the design standards. We've been talking a little bit about this. Obviously, state exempt ADUs are limited to local standards, but cannot impose standards that preclude an 800 square foot ADU. That's kind of, I think Tommy had gone through that. I think him and I have been button heads and pushed back and forth on this quite a bit. But state law is pretty clear on that. We can't impose design standards on these things, anything like that. Non-exempt ADUs, objective standards are allowed. Like I said, objective is kind of that's a pretty key word there, objective. We can't just arbitrarily come up with a different setback for an ADU, for instance, or something different on an ADU. It has to be very objective. So if the main house is blue, the ADU's got to be blue. If it's got, tile roof shingles on it, the ADU's got to have tile, matches exactly type stuff. Windows, you can do things like that. We can also kind of introduce, I don't know what this would really look like, but we could look at screening requirements for an ADU, like a non-exempt ADU between neighboring properties. It'd be kind of tough with like only a 4-foot area. But we also can we can actually have some standards in there about windows looking into neighbors' yards, things like that for the non-exempt. And again, these must be ministerial in nature, verifiable. They're not subjective review to where there's opinions kind of in play on this. So the city's current standards, there's no distinction between state exempt and non-exempt. Again, this is something that was before its time. And it applies design standards to all units across the board. So that wasn't compliant. We have to obviously make sure that the state exempt don't fall into that category.
So Ken, really quick we're talking a lot about like what's acceptable in terms of the structure itself. And I'm fearful of imagining a bunch of lean-tos and tents and whatever in people's yards that they call an ADU. But aside from that, I didn't really read anything in here that talks about the quality of the applicant or the person that's gonna live there for 30 days or longer as a requirement. Is there any live scan? Is there any Megan's Law? Is there any, like, how do you know who's gonna be living in our neighborhood?
You don't.
Okay.
You don't.
Thank you.
Let's see. The next slide here. Owner occupancy, we did discuss this just a little bit earlier. Basically, we used to have the owner had to occupy the property if it was a JADU on it. They did, it was interesting when they first came out with the ADU revisions, starting back in like 2016, where they were really starting to kind of get into mandating a lot of these things. The state at that time was they're trying to solve the housing crisis, right? So they're saying from 2020 to 2025, we could not require owner occupancy on the property for ADUs, which our previous ADU standards or regulations, which we called secondary dwelling units at that time, we required the owner to live on the property. So for a while there, they said, okay, well, from 2020 to 2025, you cannot require owner occupancy, but in 2025, that'll go away and you can start requiring that again. So there was like a 5-year period that they were kind of exempting people from having owner occupancy requirements. Well, since then, the states, obviously, I kind of knew this was going to come down the road. They've actually codified it now to where you can't have owner occupancy at all anymore. They've taken that 2025 sunset off. So what that does, and it is a little frustrating in a sense because it just opens up a lot of these properties in town that quite honestly are probably great properties for like some of our like first home buyers, you know, younger families, younger kids that might be looking at, you know, some of these older homes in town that are I guess modest in price that they can maybe get into. These things they're getting outbid because these investors are buying these houses and adding ADUs to the lot. So it does affect kind of just our community in more than one way, in the sense that some of these younger buyers are getting outpriced and not being able to even stay in our town.
Corporations coming in, buying up homes. They're not going to live in them. They're never going to worry about what that neighborhood feels like. They'll add a couple of ADUs on these things, and the rest of the neighborhood is just, you just have to take it.
Yeah,
It's not going to be your neighborhood anymore.
and the state's kind of theory on this was like, you know, adding more units, you know, adding more inventory makes things more affordable. It's kind of their theory, right? So adding more ADUs or adding more housing units or places to live, it makes things more affordable. So you'll start seeing rent prices come down and such. You know, Rippon's such a desirable town. We've seen several of these being built. I mean, they're renting for $2,000 a month, you know, for an ADU that's 750 square feet. So it's not, I mean, in a town like Ripon, it's not working that way. Maybe in a San Francisco or, you know, very populated area, there might be some of that. But that's kind of the one size fits all for the way the state does some of these things. So the owner occupancy has been removed. It's been removed for JADUs as well. There's only one caveat there, that if a JADU, a junior accessory dwelling unit, can be built without a bathroom, and you can share the sanitation facilities with the main house. So if a JADU if they are sharing that sanitation facility with the main house, we can require owner occupancy in one of the two units. Other than that, we cannot require owner occupancy.
Under 500 square feet.
So
Kitchen, is that why? 'Cause
a
if-
JADU has
Can it just
a
add a bedroom or what? I mean,
so a JADU has it's George was kind of right on this. It's 500 square feet or less, so it's a little bit
Mhm.
smaller. It does not have to have its own bathroom facility, so you can share it with the main house, or you can build one with the bathroom facility in it. And then the kitchen's kind of you have to have a kitchen facility, but it's really stripped down from what an accessory dwelling unit requires. It can be what they call an efficiency kitchen, which is kind of like I mean, you almost get away with a hot plate at that point. You know, very very minimal as far as a kitchen
kind of like an
facility.
extended stay hotel room.
Yeah. So the owner occupancy, again, like I said, that's kind of gone away with some of the new legislation that's come. Basically, we require owner occupancy, and it was going to kick back in 2025. It's the way our code reads. that's not compliant with state law, and we do need to add the JADU language into our code to be compliant as well. Parking, so, state law, maximum one parking space per ADU or per bedroom, whichever is less, which I'm trying to understand that statement there. It's kind of the way state law is written, but basically one parking space per ADU, so off-street parking. But there's basically parking is not required if it meets certain criteria. And the criteria is kind of broad there. If you're within a half-mile walking distance of public transit, you can't require parking, off-street parking. If the ADU is located within an existing structure, so if you convert a pool house or a garage, detached garage, or part of the main house, you can't require off-street parking. If the ADU is located in a historic district, you can't require off-street parking, which we don't have any historic districts here in town. The ADU is located where on-street parking permits are required but are not available. Again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense in that statement, but if you can't, if you're not handing out permits, then, you can't cite somebody for living in an ADU and parking their car in an area that has permits. And you can't require on-site parking. And if the ADU is located near a car share vehicle, basically you can't require it either. So there's quite a few exceptions for parking here, which just kind of tends to crowd our streets.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up, that we have some narrow streets, we have some wide streets, but primarily they're, especially downtown, they're narrow. And I would imagine that's where a lot of advantageous homeowners would want to build a ADU or a JADU. If you only allow one parking space per ADU per bedroom, who's not gonna say that the vehicle is owned by the person who owns the primary residence? Because right now you have one residence, I could name dozens, that have 5 vehicles, 7 vehicles for one house. And they're mostly in their parking, in their driveway, and then some are on the street and they move around. But if you add all these ADUs, I'm looking 10 years down the road, if you add all these ADUs, you got a street nightmare. You have to pull over on some streets to allow vehicles to go by. So it just,
It's
gonna make
you're
it
right.
worse.
A lot of our areas that are kind of like ground zero for these ADUs are kind of our older part of downtown, where you've got detached garages that are kind of just ripe for being converted, and we can't require off-street parking. You got there's a bus stop at the library here in town, so use a half mile from that, and you're covering quite a bit of that area anyway. So any ADU in those areas can't require off-street parking. And trust me, Michael and I talked to a lot of people who get very frustrated over this. All of a sudden a house next to them's converting into something, and it's kind of nothing we can do about it. Our hands are tied. Wish we could do something more about it, but it's out of our hands at state level at this point. Very frustrating. I get your frustration. So our current ordinance requires off-street parking if you convert your attached garage, in which case it must be replaced. So we're out of compliance here in state law. So we're updating our ordinance, or the proposed ordinance updates it to be compliant with the parking, exceptions. Commissioner Salgin asked about our fees, so we'll kind of go through these a little bit. They're very specific on what you can charge for fees. The state law basically impact fees. So every house pays impact fees when they build. You pay transportation, water, sewer, storm, parks. You pay parks and rec and police department fees, library, and all that. So there's a host of fees. I think a single family home permit for Ripon now is probably roughly $60,000 to cover all the impact fees, the impacts that the house is going to have in town. The state is very specific on these, so you no impact fees for ADUs that are 750 square feet or less. You build a 749 square foot ADU, can't charge impact fees. So So ADUs larger than 750 square feet, now you can charge impact fees. So you look at our whole impact fee sheet, but it's a proportionate share to the main house. So main house is 2,000 square feet, ADU might be 1,000, you can charge them 50% of it. So that's for new construction. And ADUs over 750. So under 750 is you can basically, that's obviously creating ADUs within an existing space. So ADUs created from existing space cannot be charged connection or capacity fees, and JADUs are not charged connection and capacity fees. So when you get into ADUs that are under 750 square feet, you can charge, like for a new construction, you can charge what we call connection capacity fees. Those are basically a water and a sewer fee. Has to be proportionate again to the main house, but you're not getting all your impact fees. You're not getting your parks and rec fees. You're not getting your storm or your library, your police department. But that is affecting parks here in town. Obviously, you're getting people that are living in these using parks, but they're not paying their fair share in the parks fees.
So Ken, just along those same lines, then as we, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but I know that's what the state wishes that it happens. If so many of these get built and we start to approach capacity in terms of sewer and water treatment and all of that kind of stuff, we have no recourse. We're gonna have to redo our water treatment plan. We're gonna have to float a bond. We're gonna have to pay for it as a city. The state's not gonna kick in a thing, are they?
No,
So
they're not.
basically, we're taking this and we're paying for it.
Yeah. In a nutshell, yeah, that's kind of. Then there are some exceptions, like you could require. I guess you can make some findings, but we never have this issue. But because we've always built like our utility systems, we build for sewer and storm, or kind of. I was kind of comparing to a car, like we got a Cadillac system here in town. We always kind of make sure our lines are sized appropriately, oversized to handle kind of all the loads that are in them and stuff. We don't have flooding in town. You go to Modesto or during storms, you see flooding because they don't have a very good storm system there. We kind of tend to overbuild and do a really nice system. It's less on maintenance and all that stuff. But if you were having a sewer line that wasn't sized enough and people wanted to keep adding ADUs and it's reaching capacity, then there's ways that you could fight some of that, like adding more ADUs, I believe, on that sense of it. I don't think we'd ever hit that problem.
And just as a coloring comment to that, and there's jurisdictions across the state are like having these real discussions about, can our facilities handle that? Like, can a fire truck make it down this street? And I'll tell you that HCD is the real arbiter of these discussions. So people are going to HCD and they are being extremely aggressive in their interpretations of the law in favor of the state's objectives, not the needs of the local jurisdictions. So yeah, it's a significant uphill battle from where we sit as a local implementing jurisdiction here.
So a question regarding the growth of ADUs and JADUs over the next decade or even 5 years. What's the anticipated number of permits that you expect and what's the population increase that we can expect?
Boy, we haven't, I didn't really run those numbers. I would say over the last 5 to 7 years, though, we've seen probably 60 ADUs in town. And prior to that, I could probably count on one hand how many accessory dwelling units we built in
So a
Ribbon.
modest amount. And do they pay payroll taxes? They pay, I'd imagine they do if they're working. They're contributing to the tax base of Ripon to some degree on sales tax and others. But I'm just wondering if we're being short-sighted on the property tax side. Is there a reassessment done when there's an ADU? I just wondering.
Yeah, there is a reassessment. I mean, the cities, I mean, I'm not, just kind of a really nutshell of finances for the city. I mean, our biggest revenue source is sales tax. That's the biggest. followed secondly by property tax. A lot lower. We get a little bit from, no, we don't. So that's our, so definitely sales tax is the biggest generator. The second in our kind of our finances would be the property taxes, which is a long way second, right? And then you've got like your franchise fees. So PG&E pays franchise fees and stuff to operate in Ripon, Jilton garbage and those type of things. So sales tax is definitely the biggest. So, obviously if people are filling up here in town and spending their tax money in town, that helps, I guess. But these properties do get reassessed. Obviously, just like if you're putting a swimming pool in your house, you're getting reassessed because you've done some improvements to your property. But Prop 13 really kind of limits how much that goes up too. I mean, so you put a $200,000 swimming pool and pool house in your backyard, your property taxes aren't going up by that amount, right? It's kind of limited to what they can. So you're seeing a tiny, maybe we'd see a little tick on the property tax side, but not much. Let's see, separate utility connections. Cannot be requested for ADUs within an existing structure. So if you're converting an existing structure, which could mean a detached structure or part of your house, we cannot require separate utility connections. And then you also, in taking into consideration, you must avoid requirements that unduly burden ADU development. So we would be looking at a case by case on this. We are going to be requiring separate connections to the city sewer and water for newly constructed ADUs. But this would be a case by case with the city engineer if there's something that's an outstanding or extraneous circumstance that would require not having them hook up. Not attached. So we're generally aligned with state law on fees and utilities. We have been for some time. The primary updates are to remove discretionary language and ensure that all requirements are clearly proportional and consistent with state limitations. Just a few more slides here, and then we'll kind of wrap up. The application process, basically, state law, there's no discretionary review or public hearing process, so it's not something that would come in front of the commission. It's something they can walk into and get a permit kind of over the counter. We do review it at the planning department to make sure they are consistent with our ordinance, which is supposed to be, to the most part, mirroring state law. So we do review it in that sense, and then after they get the clearance from planning, they can submit plans to the building department. From submittal to a complete application, they have a 60-day timeline. Again, we are kind of well below that, but that's kind of what the state's put out there. We have to determine if the application is complete within 15 days. Again, not a problem with us. I mean, we are very specific, and we will be updating our applications to make sure all the submittals are required that we need. And they must identify all missing and incomplete items after we notify them if there is any incomplete or missing items, and they're allowed to correct any deficiencies on their application if there's any. And they may appeal that decision if we say it's incomplete and they don't agree with us. They can appeal the decision, which would be the planning director's decision, which would then come before you as a body to determine if it's a complete application or not. So basically, our current standards, we provide the ministerial approval, so we are compliant with that, but we don't include, we don't really spell out. I mean, we've been following this, but we don't spell it out, so we are being a little clearer on this in our proposed ordinance. It's a 15-day completeness review. The written deficiency notice requirement, we are required to put it in writing what they're deficient on if it's not a complete application. We do have to tell them about the resubmittal process and the appeal process if it's incomplete and they don't agree with us. So that's all stuff that's in our proposed ordinance. And then amnesty, basically state law applies to ADUs and JADs that constructed before 2020. Local agencies shall not deny legalization of these units. The review is limited on those. And we must allow corrections to bring a unit into compliance and no penalties or impact fees. So we do have, if you kind of drive around town, you can see there's a lot of, there's, in the old part of town especially, there's what we call like bootlegged accessory dwelling units. It's just, they've been there probably for 40, 50 years type of deal. They could legitimize their ADUs. What we're limited to on those is just your basic safety standards. So you can't deny them due to zoning nonconformities or noncompliance with our ADU standard. We are limited to health and safety standards only. So there is a section of the California Health and Safety Code that defines what those are, what those health and safety standards are. It's a lot lower than like if you're building a brand new ADU though. So pretty much just basic living standards and limited fees. We could charge a little bit of fees in sense if we're going out for inspections and trying to inspect these units to make sure they are compliant or they have to correct some things. So, you know, our building department's time will get charged out on those, but that's really the only thing we can charge on those.
Those kind of units, can we apply, because they're not the 66-323 units, can we apply some sort of design standard?
At that point, that's a good question. I would have to defer that to the attorney. Would that be considered like a conversion unit then, since they're already existing?
So I was saying, since an amnesty situation is not a 66-323 unit, can we apply some sort of a design standard?
That was not my reading of the law. I would have to revisit that, but yeah, the state law was only talking about having a program for doing that, though I don't believe it has anything to do with I don't believe that you can include objective standards in there, but
I don't
let me,
think so
let me
either.
revisit that for a minute.
Because we are having to remove the requirements to comply with current zoning or development standards. So there is no, you can't
So
assess
probably
development standards.
not.
Like I said, what you're really kind of boiled down to on that is just safety. You know, if there's unsafe electrical in the house, you know, say there's a water heater that's not vented properly, those type of things. Minimum living standards doesn't even require air conditioning. You do have to have a heat source, so you'd have to have a heater, but you
Right.
can't. Yeah, so you're basically boiling down to just minimal standards for safety on it. If we go out and the building inspector finds that, you know, the structure's deteriorating and starting to fall down, those things could be corrected as there's life safety type of standards that would be corrected. But I don't believe we can require compatibility, design standards, or anything like that on these units.
So just a comment, Ken, and maybe clarification on proportionality. When I look at it, it talks about a 2,000 square foot primary dwelling with a proposed 1,000-foot ADU. That proportionality is some amount in relation to the total amount, in this case, an impact fee. And then down below it says, yes, school districts are authorized to, but do not have to levy impact fees on ADUs. So envision, again, I go back to a decade, you know, in time, that we're going to have these families living in these ADUs that are not paying their share. I mean, I hate to go down into the weeds on this, but that's kind of what I'm seeing is like they're escaping. It seems like these are ghost dwellings that are escaping a lot of primary responsibility of ownership or even renting.
Right. No, you're right. You know, back in the day, if you could put a second unit on your lot, or build another house, we would, you know, charge you impact fees on it. You're paying your fair share. These seems, the state's really been clear on this, and you're right. They are taking this out of our control. I would say that the school district does have some ability to charge impact fees if it's over, I think, 500 square feet. Their proportionate share, and I would encourage them to do that. I mean, we send them over to the school to pay fees on those. I'm not sure where the school stands on these, but that's up to them, kind of their own. But I would hope they would be doing that. at least gathering some of that, but you can get 450 square foot units in there, a school can't do anything about. You're right, and you can have there is impact with them to not just city things, but yeah, school districts and everything. So I'm sure we'll have probably gone through quite a bit with you guys here. Basically, just a quick summary. We have to establish state exempt ADU framework. Is kind of one of the big takeaways from this. We didn't have that even covered in our 2021 version. Wasn't even existent. We have to expand the ADU allowances to meet state law. Again, those are adding more than one ADU per lot or JADU. If they're creative enough, they can figure out how to kind of add a bunch. We're definitely, I guess, not in the business of coaching people through that process, but if they know how to navigate that, we kind of have our hands tied on some of these. Had to update the development standards, size, height, and setbacks. Obviously, state exempt has a little bit different than non-exempt. So we're having to separate those out. That was some of the summary updates there. Is to remove the non-compliant provisions for owner occupancy there where we had owner occupancy requirements starting to kick in 2025 and also for the JADU. Align the parking fees and utilities sections with the state requirements. Those didn't change a lot with the state, the recent legislation that's come through, but they're just tightening those screws a little bit more, making sure the consistencies there, I guess, across the whole state. And then update the application procedures and amnesty provisions that we had. So to wrap it up a little bit and then turn it back over to the commission here, the staff recommendation is here on the screen. We are asking that you recommend that the city council adopt the ordinance amending the section of 1686 of the Ripon Municipal Code. As you can see on the screen here, it's also in your staff report. And then I hear the hearing final steps tonight. Obviously, questions. You guys have been asking some of those, which is great. I'm not sure I've been able to answer them to your satisfaction very much tonight, but kind of is what it is. What it is. Public comment. We don't have anybody here, but we did have that one letter that came in that we will introduce into the record tonight. Go ahead.
So basically, what's he saying? He's saying we're still not in compliance?
Yeah, I'll let city attorney.
I mean, because the only thing I can see that he's saying is that we have to allow the applicants to develop one conversion ADU and one new. I mean, that's the only, as far as I can tell, on the second page, he talks about that, but everything else, we are up to date. We are compliant.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, so I shouldn't say commissioner. I would. What is the title? Not mayor, not president. What are we? Or is it
Madam Chair?
Chairman. Words. Some of us not have way with words. My apologies, Madam Chair. So yeah, there's a little bit of confusion here. I guess to summarize this really quickly, I would say that this letter misreads our ordinance in just a small. There's a small error there. They do get the state law right, and just to review, so he references SB 543, which clarified something about state exempt ADUs. They in Ken's presentation, there's 4 categories of state exempt ADUs: 2 that apply to single family and 2 that apply to multifamily. So because Ken, like Ken said, don't deal with a lot of multifamily, I'll focus on the single family. There's category 1 of the single family is the conversion ADU, the conversion of an existing structure and then a JADU. That's category number 1. Category number 2 is the detached new construction structure. So if you count those all up, you have 280. And SB 543 clarified this. Last year, before this new law came into effect, people were scratching their heads because the law was poorly written. Do we get both? Do we get both category 1 and category 2, or do we just get one? And so some jurisdictions were saying, no, you just get one. Well, state law changed, and they said you can have any combination of the 3 units that are described in those 2 categories. So that's clarified. So yeah, pick what fits, and it's pro applicant as consistent with
pick
everything
one or
else in
all.
the state. Yeah, you could have one or all. So that was what was clarified by SB 543. The letter is correct about that. So if you add all those up, you have 2 ADUs and 1 JADU. If you read our ordinance, and if you read the provision that he has issue with is 16.86.040 or 060,
Right.
section A1. And in that, we say that except as otherwise provided in this chapter, remember that, only 1 ADU and 1 JADU may be permitted per lot regardless of zoning. This is a section of our ordinance that talks about general standards that apply to ADUs throughout our city. And there's a number of provisions within there. But on its face, that seems like it would conflict because we're only saying 1 ADU and 1 JADU, but you actually get 2 ADUs and 1 JADU by the state exemption. That's why I wrote, except as otherwise provided in this chapter. Earlier in the chapter, we talk about state exempt ADUs and how we're going to implement them consistent with state law. And that's captured in our ordinance. So the exception to the rule is state exempt ADUs. When we're talking about non-exempt ADUs, where these standards apply. And so as staff deals with these applications, they'll come in, but fundamentally this is a misreading of our ordinance. And so I think this commenter is trying to say that we're unduly limiting these units, which is just not the case.
Okay, so back to this commenter who is in Oakland. Will you answer this, or do we have to worry about this, or do we just say
There's nothing really to
nothing to
answer, and
Because
to be frank, I mean, this will be, really, this is an organization that's probably scouring the whole state and making these sort of comments,
Okay.
And for us, there's no obligation to respond to a comment like this. We are confident in the writing. However, for this person and for organizations like this, HCD is going to be reviewing this ordinance. So
what's ACD?
the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
Okay.
And that is part of the state law process for this as well. So what we can expect, and again, to my comment earlier, HCD is being very aggressive in their interpretation of the law and in their interpretation of each city's needs. So they think that they have, the best interests of the state as they are determining localities' specific situations, which I'm sure a lot of you may take issue with, and I feel similarly. Now, the law requires that we submit this to HCD for their review and approval. If HCD comes back with comments and says your ordinance is not compliant with state law for X, Y, and Z reasons, well, then we have to either respond and tell them why they're wrong. We can amend the ordinance as they see fit, or more aggressive stances than that. Very few jurisdictions are going that route. But so if we are back discussing this again because of comments that are received from HCD, I would not be surprised, because that is very common. Despite some very well-written ordinances, they are commenting on everything. So just to forewarn you on that.
And you have organizations like this HDF that are probably going to be approaching HCD with their issues.
They already have been.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're
And
gonna
that's
be
a state organization paid for by our tax dollars. Thank you.
That's
State-
correct. So
state of California.
HCD is a wing of the state of California.
Yeah, they're the ones that actually reviewed and with our housing element, right? The we have
Okay.
to submit the housing element to HCD, and they're the ones that review all that too. So obviously, public
to the
comment.
Coastal Commission?
I don't, one more question, Ken. One of the things I noted was that there was a requirement for pre-approved plans by 2025. Do we have like pre-approved
There's not a
Design-
requirement for pre-approved plans.
Okay.
There's a requirement that we have the ability to have pre-approved plans submitted to us. So like you have to have a program to be able to
Okay,
accept those.
thanks
We
for
don't have to come
clarifying.
up with plans.
We don't have to.
No.
I was
However-
reading it the other way, like we had to come
No.
up with some.
But we have to have a program, and that's something that's probably gonna be a more of a policy here that we develop in-house that I don't know if it'd be adopted by resolution or something, but that we would have to have a policy in place that we could accept pre-approved plans.
Okay.
Some jurisdictions are going that way. They're
Mhm.
going a little further and embracing these. So much so that they're putting plans together and kind of green lighting, development of these more so than other communities. But it comes at a cost. You're developing these plans at 20-some thousand or so, to develop a whole building set of plans
Right.
that people. And it doesn't mean a jurisdiction can't charge somebody to use them. So if a jurisdiction did have a pre-approved set of plans that people could utilize, you can charge a usage fee of those. So it's not like they get to automatically use them for free. It's just it might speed up that process because it's already been plan checked and such. So where you could not have to go through a plan review and all that. It's been pre-approved. But you have to have the ability, a program to do that. You don't have to have the plans done, but you have to be able to kind of put that in place and other people can submit pre-approved, ask to be on a pre-approved plan list. So then the final steps here, obviously commission deliberation, what you're doing, and then the action on the recommendation tonight. City Attorney Churchill said that it was interesting point is HCD is taking a hard look at these, right? So they're letting communities obviously update their ordinances. Everybody's probably going through a little bit of this now. Some might have done it a little sooner or later. We go through this. City Council is going to hear kind of the same synopsis here. Might struggle or wrestle with a few things, and there could be a few tweaks here or there if things are brought up. And then you submit it to HCD so they can go through it and send it back to you. I don't know why they just didn't reverse that process and say submit us your proposed ordinances so we can comment on these. So when they actually get flushed through the Planning Commission, City Council, you have something that they quote unquote agree with. But I'm done questioning how the state does some things. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair, and open for a recommendation for this maybe hard pill to swallow.
Thank you for walking us through this 131 pages. Any other questions or comments?
Doesn't seem like
Any
there's a whole
motions?
lot of discussion to be had even. I mean, we have to comply. If we don't
Yeah.
comply, then we end up with potential litigation on our hands and spending more and more money than we're already doing. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, if we're going to try to defend our position, you're right. Yeah, you are spending money trying to defend ourselves. If not, you're just you're falling back on state standards, which is as odd as this sounds, and as much as we have to acquiesce to state laws, they're even way more liberal than what we have in our ordinance. So
Yeah.
I don't think you definitely don't want to just fall back on state law, period.
My only comment on that would be to be as compliant with the state as possible, given this letter, but also just have very strict, comprehensive code enforcement as we move forward.
And where we can,
Correct.
where we can.
We've been at this for some time now, Tommy and I and Michael actually, and yeah, so we are trying to meet state law as much as we can here and make sure we get an HCD compliant ADU ordinance. But yeah, that's where we're at.
And I know a lot of communities are going through this. I know like in the Carmel, Monterey, Pacific Grove area, it's constant in the newspaper what they're dealing with. Yeah. So, all right, anything else on that? Okay, so we are at a point for potential motion.
Can we open and close the public hearing for this item?
Oh, all right. So the public hearing is closed. So we're ready to move, we're ready to act.
Is that okay? Make the following motion. I'm not sure if I'm Don Quixote and you're Sancho Panza, we're tilting at windmills. I'm not sure who's who here, but the planning commission recommends that the city council approve the amendments to chapter 16.86 accessory dwelling unit ordinance based on the findings in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
I'll begrudgingly second that motion.
Awesome. Let's do a voice vote real quick. David Collins,
Yes.
George Salgin,
Yes.
Jeff Fayou,
Yes.
Deborah Van Essen,
Yes.
Stephen Berber.
Yes.
Right on.
All right, do we have any reports? Planning director.
Yeah, after it looks like a long hiatus, I didn't realize it was November was the last meeting, but yeah, it's been a while. We do actually have something for our May meeting that's in the pipeline that's coming up. The Ripon Vet Hospital in town is looking to add emergency vet services to their operation, and because of their location and proximity to housing, they are required to get a use permit to do so because they'll be open 24 hours.
Is that the veterinary unit that's over by Vermeulen and?
No, this
Corpor-
is
is it-
Ripon Vet here. By
Oh,
Pizza
they're
Hut.
applying
Yeah.
for
At
24
downtown.
hours. That's great.
So they will be adding that operation to their practice, which would require 24/7 operation. And because of the extended hours, obviously we have to go through a use permit. So that'll be in front of you guys next month. And I believe that's it, unless we get really energetic and maybe bring a few ordinances through. We are looking to update kind of our development title ordinances. It's been probably 10+ years since we've looked at our ordinances. There's roughly, 60 or 80 chapters in our development title. We certainly don't want to hit you all with, we don't want to hit you with all of them at once, but we might start cycling some through, like 3 to 5 ordinances at a time. Some of them will be very basic updates and others might have a little more substance to them. Just to kind of make sure, obviously when you adopt an ordinance as you guys are kind of looking to or recommending tonight to do, once you start implementing it, it's when you figure out where the holes are in the dam, right? So you got to figure out how to plug some of those sometimes. And then updating them just to be compliant with state law, different state laws and some inconsistencies. So it is a good idea to go through those from time to time to make sure like there's, we are adjusting those accordingly. And if there's standards that the city wants to make sure are still implemented or add to some of those things and to keep our town the great community that we love. So those might start cycling through. We're just kind of using those, I guess, if there is anything that's downtime. I don't know if that's true anymore, but it is important we get through those, and that's probably going to be a couple year type of project. So we'll see if we can get some of those plugged in to keep you guys a little busier.
All right. Any reports from our city attorney?
I think I've spilled enough bad news for one night.
Okay. Any commissioner reports? Anything exciting happening? Nothing? All right. This meeting is adjourned.